The sun was barely up when the rancher noticed a figure riding toward her place. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet where even the wind seems to pause and listen. She stood by the corral, wiping dust off her gloves, watching the stranger come closer. Something about the slow, steady way he rode made you feel he wasn't just passing by. He had a purpose, and you could almost sense it before he even spoke. When he reached her gate, he tipped his hat and asked if she had a moment. His voice was low, tired, almost uneasy. He explained that he had a problem on his land, something small, he said. Small enough that he felt bad even asking for help. But the way his eyes shifted told a different story. It made you lean in a little, wondering what he wasn't saying. The rancher didn't think twice. To her, chores were chores, and a neighbor in need was never a burden. She nodded, expecting it to be something simple, maybe a stuck gate, a stray calf, or a busted fence line. She even chuckled softly, telling him it wouldn't take long at all. As she grabbed her hat and walked toward her horse, you could feel the story setting itself up. The calm before something strange. The moment before someone discovers they don't know as much as they think. And as the stranger waited, shifting in his saddle, you could tell there was more to his visit than he dared to admit. The rancher swung herself into the saddle with the kind of ease that only comes from years of doing the same motion 100 times a day. She wasn't worried, not even a little. She'd faced storms that tore roofs off barns. She'd pulled stubborn cattle out of mud pits deep enough to swallow a wagon. She'd chased off coyotes, patched fences, fixed wells, and survived winters so cold they cracked the earth itself. Whatever this man was talking about, whatever small problem he brought, she felt sure it would barely count as trouble. You could almost hear it in the tone of her voice when she spoke to him. Calm, steady, lightly teasing. She told him he didn't need to look so nervous. She'd probably handled worse before breakfast. She said it with a half-smile, like somebody who believed the day was already decided, already tamed, and nothing out there could challenge her. And the more she talked, the more the visitor looked unsure if he should agree with her or warn her again. He started to describe the issue, but his words kept slipping. He called it small. Then he called it odd. Then he said it was nothing she should worry about, only to follow that with a quiet, "But it ain't normal either." He looked like a man trying to convince himself that the problem wasn't as big as it felt. But she didn't catch on to that part. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. Confidence can make a person blind in small ways, and right now she wore that confidence like armor. The more the rancher talked, the more it became clear she didn't think this was any kind of real challenge. She mentioned past jobs she'd done for nearby ranches. She told him about the time she dealt with a bull so mean it charged through 3 pens before she finally tired it out. Or the time she faced a pack of wild dogs that had been terrorizing a neighbor's sheep. She had stories, and she delivered them with relaxed certainty. They weren't bragging, not really. They were just the truth of a life lived in hard places. The man listened with growing unease. He kept shifting in his saddle, glancing back toward the direction of his ranch as if checking whether something might follow him. That small motion, barely noticeable, would make anyone watching feel a touch of curiosity, maybe even suspicion. But she didn't notice him doing it. She was too busy reassuring him, trying to lighten the weight he clearly carried. And the thing about confidence is that it changes the air around a person. As she spoke, even you, as the listener, might have started to feel the same way she felt. Maybe it really was nothing big. Maybe the man was just anxious. Maybe the story would be quick and simple after all. That's what her voice did. It pulled you into her certainty, made you believe in the strength she carried. But the deeper he tried to explain, the more his words tangled. He said he'd tried to handle it himself but stopped when it started feeling wrong. He said the sounds didn't match what he saw. He said he wasn't even sure how to describe it without sounding foolish. And every time he tried to get to the point, he hesitated. Not because he didn't know the words, but because he wasn't sure she'd believe them. She waved him off gently, told him she'd seen strange things before, told him problems always looked worse in the moment and better once you took a closer look. Her tone stayed steady, like someone walking in the dark but convinced there's nothing to trip over. The visitor gave a thin smile at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. His hands tightened on the reins. You knew he was trying to trust her, trying to trust that her skill would be enough. Still, something inside him remained unsettled. As they prepared to ride out, she checked her gear quickly but casually, like she didn't expect to need any of it. Her lasso hung at her saddle horn. Her old rifle remained strapped behind her, untouched. She didn't bother to bring spare ammunition or even a lantern. It was daylight after all. And this was supposed to be quick, wasn't it? You could almost feel the disconnect between them. She believed the problem was small. He hoped she was right, but his eyes kept saying he didn't think so. The dynamic between them created a slow tension, the kind that settles into your stomach without announcing itself. The rancher didn't notice it, but you did. Small shifts, quiet breaths, the way someone looks at the horizon when they don't trust it anymore. And still, she stayed relaxed. She talked about the land, the weather, the cattle prices. She spoke about how early work was always the easiest part of the day. She even joked that he was lucky she wasn't busier, or she might have told him to come back tomorrow. He tried to laugh along, but the sound that came out was thin, like a rope pulled too tight. The more she showed her confidence, the more the visitor looked like a man watching someone walk toward something dangerous without realizing it. But he didn't stop her. Maybe he felt embarrassed that he couldn't describe the problem clearly. Maybe he didn't want to sound afraid. Or maybe he just needed someone, anyone, to take over, even if the price was letting her walk into something she didn't fully understand. As a viewer, you can sense the imbalance forming between them. Her certainty feels solid, grounded in years of experience. His doubt feels fragile but rooted in something he's already seen with his own eyes. You start to wonder which one of them is closer to the truth. And the way the morning light hits the land, quiet and almost too perfect, makes it feel like both of them might be wrong, like the day is hiding something neither expects. The rancher didn't pause, didn't reconsider, didn't sense any danger. She simply nudged her horse forward, ready to handle whatever waited. She believed the problem was small. She believed it would be quick. And the visitor, still uncertain, rode beside her, hoping she was right, even as his silence began to reveal just how much he feared she wasn't. The two of them set out, riding side by side across the open land. The morning sun had risen just enough to warm the air, but not enough to burn away the leftover chill. The rancher rode with an easy posture, almost lazy in the saddle, letting her horse pick a steady pace. She looked completely at home out here. Nothing about the day felt unusual to her, and that confidence seemed to guide every movement she made. You could see it in the way she nudged her horse, in the way she scanned the land without any real worry in her eyes. The visitor, however, carried the kind of tension you feel more than you see. His back was too straight, his shoulders too tight. Every so often he looked behind them or off to the side, as if checking shadows that didn't belong in daylight. He didn't speak much now. The rancher noticed but didn't think much of it. Many folks rode quietly when they were nervous. She assumed he felt silly for calling her out for something so simple, and she let him sit with that, believing the ride might calm him down. The land stretched wide and gentle at first. Tall grass swayed in slow waves. A few distant hills rolled up like sleeping giants. The sky above was clear except for a thin string of clouds drifting lazily by. It should have been peaceful. The kind of ride that lets a person relax and forget whatever trouble they had. But the deeper they rode onto his property, the more a certain stillness settled over everything. It wasn't dramatic, not yet, just a subtle quietness. Even the birds seemed to be keeping their distance. The rancher noticed the silence but brushed it off as morning settling in. She said something light about how his land looked well kept, how quiet was usually a good sign. He nodded, but his breath caught a little before he answered. That tiny hesitation created the first small shift in the atmosphere, like a whisper of warning only the viewer could hear. He finally spoke, voice low. He said the problem wasn't something he could see, not at first. He said it felt wrong more than it looked wrong. The rancher raised an eyebrow at that but stayed calm. People said strange things when they were stressed. She encouraged him to keep talking, thinking it might help him sort his thoughts. But he shook his head and simply said, "You'll understand when we get there." The way he said it made something tighten in the air. Not enough to scare her, but enough to make you, as the listener, lean closer, waiting to hear more. But he didn't explain. He just kept riding, guiding her further across the land. As they traveled, the scenery began to change. The soft grass gave way to patches of dry soil. The wind picked up in quick, uneven bursts. Here and there, shrubs looked torn or disturbed, as if something had brushed past them during the night. The rancher noticed the marks but didn't comment. Animals could do that easily. Nothing about it felt unusual enough to slow her down. But the visitor noticed too. And each time his eyes settled on the damaged shrubs, he tightened his grip on the reins just a little more. You could see the pattern forming even if the rancher didn't. Whatever had happened here had shaken him, and he still wasn't sure she understood the seriousness of it. The deeper they went, the more you could sense a kind of pressure in the environment, something building in silence. The rancher didn't feel it the same way. Her mind stayed focused on the task. She tried again to lighten the moment by joking that maybe his problem was just a stubborn groundhog or a fox digging tunnels where it shouldn't. The visitor managed a weak smile, but his eyes didn't match the expression. His fear lay somewhere in those eyes, buried like something he didn't want to look at directly. After a while, the rancher began noticing faint lines in the dirt, thin cracks that ran longer than normal. Not deep enough to worry her, but strange enough to catch her attention. She slowed her horse slightly and leaned forward to get a better look as they passed. The visitor watched her, waiting for her reaction. When she didn't comment, he asked quietly if she saw anything odd. She shrugged and said it was nothing serious. The land changed, weather shifted, ground settled, nothing new. But the visitor let out a soft breath, not of relief but frustration. Like he expected her to see more, like he wanted her to understand without him having to explain. The quiet between them changed again. Not a peaceful quiet this time, but something heavier. The rancher finally asked how far they had left to go. He pointed ahead, to a rise in the land not too far away. He said the trouble was just beyond it. His voice dropped even lower, and that drop felt like a sign, one he might not even know he was giving. They rode up the small rise. The rancher stayed relaxed, but her eyes sharpened as she scanned the land. Something in her instincts, quiet and subtle, started waking up. She didn't say anything yet, not wanting to give the visitor more reason to worry. But she did sit straighter in the saddle, preparation slipping in behind her confidence. As they reached the top of the rise, the land stretched out in front of them. And that's when the atmosphere shifted again, quick but noticeable. The grass ahead looked flattened in odd places. The soil looked disturbed. And a faint pattern, almost like a trail but too messy to be one, cut across the ground. The rancher slowed her horse without thinking. Her eyes narrowed as she examined the area. The visitor didn't have to say a word. His silence spoke enough. This was where the problem began. This was where he first realized something was wrong. And while the rancher didn't feel fear yet, something inside her finally began to take the situation seriously. She didn't show it, not on her face, not in her voice. But inside, something small and sharp turned its head, paying attention. And as a viewer, you could feel it too. The sense that the simple ride was turning toward something deeper, something waiting just ahead, where the land dipped and the truth lay hidden beneath the surface. The rancher guided her horse down the slope, eyes fixed on the ground ahead. Something about the pattern in the dirt kept tugging at her attention. It wasn't just disturbed soil anymore. It was too deliberate, too spread out, as if whatever made the marks hadn't come in a straight line but in circles, stopping here and there. Her horse hesitated once, barely noticeable, just a tiny shift of weight, but she felt it. Animals sense things long before people did. She patted its neck, reassuring it even though she wasn't sure what she was reassuring it about. The visitor stayed a few paces behind her, almost as if he didn't want to reach the spot first. His silence grew heavier. His breaths became shallow. He kept glancing at the rancher, like he was measuring her reaction, trying to determine whether she'd already guessed something he couldn't bring himself to say. You, as the listener, could almost feel how badly he wanted her to take this more seriously, but at the same time, he feared what she'd think if he voiced his worries. As they got closer, the rancher leaned forward slightly, narrowing her gaze. The soil wasn't just turned over. It was collapsed inward, forming shallow dips, small but too many. Dozens of them, each one about the size of a boot print but rounder, deeper at the center, almost as if something had pushed up from underneath and then slipped back down. She dismounted, boots hitting the dirt with a gentle thud. Kneeling, she brushed her fingers across the edge of one dip. The soil felt loose, brittle, as if something had disturbed it recently. She pressed down lightly, testing the firmness, and felt the faintest give beneath her hand. Not much. Just enough to make a thought flicker through her mind. The ground shouldn't move like that. Her horse snorted and backed up a step. The visitor froze where he was, watching the rancher carefully, waiting to see whether she finally felt what he had felt that first morning when he discovered the spot. He started to speak, then stopped, forcing the words back down. The rancher stood up slowly and walked a few steps forward. There, in the center of the flattened area, she saw claw marks, thin, sharp, and long. They weren't from a coyote, not from a badger, not from anything she recognized immediately. They curved in an odd way, like whatever made them dragged its nails across the dirt while turning. She didn't show fear, not outwardly, but you could sense something had shifted inside her. Her earlier confidence, while still present, now blended with a sharper awareness. She wasn't dismissing the situation anymore. Something here wasn't normal, and she could no longer deny it. The visitor finally spoke, voice trembling slightly. He said the marks had appeared overnight. He said he'd heard noises too, low rumbling sounds under the soil, like something breathing deep beneath the surface. He said he'd placed his ear to the ground once, only once, and what he heard made him back away so fast he nearly tripped. The rancher listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening a little as she processed his words. She crouched again and pressed her palm flat against the ground. She held still, concentrating. For a moment there was nothing but the quiet morning breeze. Then, so faint it almost disappeared before she could register it, she felt a tiny vibration under her hand. Not constant, not rhythmic. Just a soft shift, like something repositioning itself far below. Her eyes flicked up toward the visitor. His face told her everything. He had felt that too, maybe even louder, maybe even stronger before she arrived. He had been living with that fear, waiting for someone to believe him. The rancher stood again, brushing dirt off her hands, and took in the whole area. The dips in the ground, the claw marks, the disturbed shrubs leading toward the rise. It wasn't enough to make her panic, but it was enough to strip away her earlier certainty. The problem wasn't small, it wasn't simple, and whatever caused it wasn't above ground. Her horse shifted again, restless now. The rancher held the reins firmly, whispering softly to calm it. Animals didn't spook easily on her property, but this land wasn't hers. Something here had unsettled it. She walked toward the far edge of the disturbed area, where the grass was torn in thick streaks. The blades were ripped from the soil, not chewed or cut, but yanked upward with force. She ran her hand over the torn patch and found more claw marks, deeper ones, angled downward as if something had tried to climb out or pull itself back in. A faint sound rose in the air, so soft it was almost like imagination. A low, distant groan coming from beneath the earth. The rancher froze, body still, listening. The visitor backed up a step, breath catching in his throat. The sound faded quickly, swallowed by the silence, but it had been real. You could feel it in the way the rancher's shoulders stiffened, in the way her eyes sharpened as she stared at the ground. She slowly drew in a breath through her nose, exhaling steady and controlled. She didn't say it aloud, but the truth was settling into her thoughts. This wasn't a job she could shrug off. The land held something unusual, something hidden, something alive. She walked back to her horse, but not with the same easy stride she had earlier. This time her movements were measured, careful, as if the ground itself deserved respect now. The visitor watched her, waiting for a reaction, waiting for her to speak. He needed her to understand what he'd been trying to say from the beginning. The rancher placed a calming hand on her horse's neck and looked back at the area one more time. Her silence wasn't dismissive anymore. It wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. And though she didn't say a word yet, the air around them felt different, thicker, heavier, filled with the weight of something that wasn't supposed to be here. Something they were only just beginning to uncover. The rancher took a slow step toward the center of the disturbed ground, her eyes tracing every dip, every torn patch of soil, every claw mark etched into the earth. Something inside her, something old, instinctive, told her that whatever she was dealing with didn't move the way normal creatures did. It moved underneath. It watched from below. It listened. And the quiet around them now felt less like peaceful morning silence, and more like the breath-holding pause before something shifts in the dark. She crouched again, pressing her fingertips lightly against one of the deeper claw grooves. The edges were sharp, the dirt freshly carved. This hadn't been here long. She could tell by the moisture still clinging to the soil. It made her chest tighten just a little, the way a person tightens their grip on a rope without realizing it. She wasn't afraid yet, but she was alert, fully alert. Behind her, the visitor stepped back again, boots scraping the dry ground. He didn't want to get too close. He didn't want to disturb anything. You could tell he was torn between wanting to help her and wanting to stay as far away from the center as possible. His eyes darted around, searching for movement, expecting something to burst through the soil at any moment. His fear made the air shift, like a tremor that didn't come from the earth, but from the tension building in the moment. The rancher ran her palm across the dirt, flattening it slightly. She leaned in closer, listening again, waiting for another sign. And then faintly she heard it. A soft scrape beneath the ground. Not a rumble this time. More like something shifting against stone or dragging a limb through packed soil. It was slow, almost lazy, but unmistakably alive. She froze. Her breath stopped for just a second. The visitor whispered her name, barely audible. She didn't answer. Her attention stayed locked on the ground beneath her boots. The noise wasn't loud enough for panic, but loud enough to confirm the truth. Whatever was down there wasn't small, and it wasn't sleeping. She rose slowly, brushing dust from her knees, moving with deliberate care. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low and controlled. She told the visitor to stay still. He did, though his shoulders trembled slightly. His horse snorted nervously behind him, stamping the dirt as if trying to warn them of something it couldn't explain in any other way. The rancher stepped toward the largest dip in the soil. It was deeper than the rest, wide enough for her to fit both boots inside if she wanted to. She circled it, studying the shape. The ground dipped in a smooth, bowl-like curve, as if something had pressed upward from below and then been pulled back into the earth. She didn't step too close, not yet. Every instinct in her body told her to respect that spot. As she studied it, she noticed something else. Hair. Thin strands of pale, wiry hair stuck to the edge of the dip, caught in a crack. She reached for it carefully, pulling the strand free. It was longer than any animal hair she knew. Thicker, too. The kind of hair that didn't belong to a farm creature or a wild predator. Something about it felt wrong the moment it touched her glove. The visitor saw the hair and swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he spoke, telling her he found more of it the morning he came across the spot. He hadn't touched it. He didn't want to. He said the ground moved while he was standing there, just a little, but enough to make him step back so fast he nearly fell. She turned the hair between her fingers, examining it in the sunlight. It glistened faintly, almost translucent. Not animal fur, not anything she recognized. And the moment she realized that, something deep in the soil gave a small, distinct thud. Not loud, not violent, but direct, like a knock. Her breath caught. She backed up a step before she even realized she was moving. The visitor gasped and stumbled farther away. Even the horses jerked their heads, ears pinned back. Another thud followed, this one softer, almost thoughtful, like whatever was beneath them was testing the strength of the surface, or listening for who stood above. The rancher steadied herself, forcing her heartbeat to slow. She wasn't the type to run. She never had been, but she wasn't foolish either. She knew danger when she felt it. And she felt it now, rising from beneath the ground in tiny, uncertain pulses. She looked around again. The dips were arranged in no clear pattern but spread wide, too wide for one creature unless it could travel underground quickly, or unless there were more than one. That thought settled into her mind like a weight. She didn't voice it. Not yet. But the visitor saw something in her expression shift, and that alone made him step closer, as if her reaction mattered more than the strange noises around them. Her horse tugged hard at the reins, pulling her attention back. Animals don't lie, and horses don't spook at nothing. When they react, it's because something is wrong. Very wrong. The rancher moved toward the horse to steady it, but before she reached it, the ground trembled. Not a quake, not a shake, just a quick ripple under the soil, like something brushing against the underside of the crust. She spun around, eyes scanning the dips, expecting movement, expecting a burst of dirt or a sudden strike. But nothing happened. The soil settled again, still and deceptive, as if pretending it hadn't moved at all. The visitor whispered that this was why he couldn't sleep, why he didn't let his cattle graze here anymore, why he came to her in the first place. His voice cracked as he admitted he didn't know how deep the thing went, or how big it truly was, or how far it could move without leaving a trace on the surface. The rancher took a slow breath, lifting her chin as she scanned the horizon, then the ground, then the dips again. Everything in her body now recognized the truth. This wasn't a small problem. This wasn't a one-hour job. This was something else entirely. She tightened her grip on the reins, eyes locked on the earth beneath her boots, waiting for the next sign, the next scrape, the next ripple, the next reminder that the story wasn't going to be quick or simple or anything she originally believed. The rancher didn't move at first. She stood still, letting the silence settle again, letting her pulse slow enough to think. The visitor watched her anxiously, as though her reaction alone might determine what happened next. The dips in the soil sat all around them like shallow breaths frozen in dirt, each one hiding a secret below. The air had changed, no longer cool and gentle, but heavy in a way that pressed against the back of the neck, urging caution. Slowly, she stepped backward toward her horse, never taking her eyes off the largest dip. She knew better than to turn her back on anything that moved underground. Creatures that traveled beneath the surface relied on vibrations. A fast, careless step could bring them up, or draw them closer. She moved with that same careful instinct she used when approaching a rattlesnake she couldn't see but could feel. Her horse snorted, stamping nervously, its ears pinned to the flattened patches of earth. Even the visitor's horse pulled against its reins, muscles tight with fear. Animals knew. They always knew. The rancher whispered to calm her horse, but even her voice sounded different now, lower, controlled, as if she were afraid to wake something sleeping under the ground. She finally spoke to the visitor, asking him how long this had been happening. He swallowed hard, unable to answer at first. Then he explained that the claw marks appeared 3 mornings ago. The dip spread every night since then. The noises started only a day before he came to her. He said it with the guilt of a man who waited too long to ask for help, because he hoped the problem would fix itself. But nothing about the scene suggested a problem that ever fixed itself. The rancher listened carefully, piecing together the pattern in her mind. 3 days. That meant whatever was moving under the earth wasn't passing through, it was staying, nesting, searching. She didn't share her thoughts aloud, but the visitor seemed to sense that she was connecting details he hadn't considered. The wind cut across the field, lifting loose dust into thin spirals. It brushed over the dips, revealing faint streaks where something had dragged upward. The rancher crouched again near one of the smaller dips, not touching it this time, just studying the way the soil curved inward. She noticed something she hadn't before, a small pebble at the center, cracked clean in half. Not broken by pressure from above, but shattered from below. Her breath caught. Something with strength had pushed upward with enough force to split stone. She stood quickly, brushing her hands on her jeans. This time, the fear wasn't something she pushed aside. It was something she accepted. Fear made people cautious. Fear kept them alive. The visitor watched her face, trying to read her thoughts. For the first time, she didn't hide the seriousness of the situation. She didn't pretend it was still a small job. She didn't joke to calm him. She looked him straight in the eyes and asked a simple question, where the sounds had been loudest. His throat tightened. He pointed toward a thick patch of grass on the far end of the field, where the dips clustered closer together, almost touching in some places. The rancher nodded once. Then she walked toward that patch with slow, deliberate steps. The visitor hesitated before following, torn between wanting to stay safe and needing to see what she saw. His horse refused to move, pulling back hard, so he tied it to a distant post and caught up to her on foot. As they approached the cluster of dips, the ground felt different, not unstable, but hollow, like a thin crust stretched over something deeper. The rancher felt it through her boots, felt the subtle shift with each step. She stopped just before the densest area, motioning for the visitor to do the same. She waited, breathing evenly, listening. Minutes stretched thin. Nothing moved. Nothing scraped. Nothing thudded. Only silence. Then when even the wind paused, a long, slow crack split the ground behind them. The visitor spun, panicked, but the rancher didn't flinch. She turned calmly, following the sound. A crack had opened in one of the dips, just wide enough to reveal the dark soil beneath. Something had shifted down there. Something big enough to break the surface without rising fully. She walked toward the crack cautiously, crouching beside it. The visitor whispered for her not to get closer, but she ignored him gently, her focus sharp and narrowed. She leaned in, listening. The earth beneath her boots pulsed once. Not a tremor, more like a heartbeat. Deep, slow, powerful. She exhaled and stood again, stepping back with controlled movements. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She simply backed away, keeping her eyes on the ground as she returned to the visitor's side. He asked what she thought it was. His voice shook, cracking under fear and uncertainty. The rancher didn't answer right away. She just stared at the dips, at the broken pebble, at the claw marks, at the crack splitting the surface like a warning. Finally, she spoke quietly, telling him what she knew. Whatever lay beneath the earth wasn't small. It wasn't simple. And it wasn't done moving. The visitor's knees weakened, but the rancher didn't let him fall into panic. Her voice remained steady. She told him the land itself was telling them something, that something below was growing restless, that the quiet wouldn't last long, that they needed to be careful with every step they took from here on. There in the field, with the sun rising higher and casting long shadows across the dips, the truth settled around them, heavy and unspoken. The rancher had come expecting a quick chore. She found something that defied every story she'd ever heard. Something hidden, something dangerous, something waiting. And though she didn't yet know what they would do next, one thing was certain. Whatever was beneath them, whatever was waking, was far bigger than the small problem she had been promised.